is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Sunshine by Robin McKinley, sponsored by Rosie Kolb. In this episode, Natasha gets real anxious. Escape scenes make me anxious. And also, okay, calling upon your demon heritage much? Welcome to Spoil Me. Okay, so that's not quite fair because it wasn't demon heritage, but it's pretty close. So this set of chapters, pages, it's not really divided up into chapters. So I'll just say this section of pages. Guys, y'all should read Sunshine. I'm just going to say, I have in the event information, if you're interested in picking up a copy, and in the show notes for the episode, there is a link so that you can go and purchase the episode and, or purchase the book. And this has turned into some real interesting shit. So last episode, I had talked to you all about how, there were all kinds of different beings in this universe. There are vampires, there are were animals, there are demons. But we weren't told in that section that there were basically witches, sorcerers. I'm not sure if in this universe there are different terms for different types of people who use magic, because in Dresden Files, for example, sorcerer is meant to be like a mark of using dark magic. You would just be a wizard if you use, good magic, with good intentions. So we find out some interesting information here about Ray. First of all, I had last episode been kind of like, oh, did we ever learn her name? And it turns out that the name of the book, Sunshine, it's named after Ray because that's her nickname. And her nickname is also her power. I'm going to back it up a little bit, because she has this like weird fever dream, and this is all going on while she's still locked up. But she's talking about when she was a little girl and she would hang out with her grandmother, who she loved. And her grandmother is in this kind of weird position. I appreciated a lot this being sort of addressed in the text, that there can be strange sort of relationship problems where you love somebody, but they're part of that half of the family that your other parent had problems with. And so you wind up not seeing them that much anymore, which it's a bummer thing, but it's definitely a true thing that happens. And so I hadn't really thought about what went wrong with Ray's dad, that her mother decided to leave the way that she did. I wasn't even sure if that was going to wind up being an important part of the story, so I just kind of let that be. But it turns out it is apparently a pretty important part of the story, because we find out that there were some shady dealings going on that probably led to her mother having had enough. So it turns out that her father's side of the family, their last name is Blaze, which my headcanon now is that Ray is black and she is related to Zabini Blaze, who is in Hogwarts because he is also a sorcerer related to her dad. And that's the end of it. So I hope that you're all enjoying my TED Talk. And yeah, her dad is notorious enough that when she says who her father was to the vampire, it turns out that dude totally knows who her father is. And I feel like that's a real bad sign. And when her mother left, she did all sorts of things to keep Ray's father from finding them, which Ray has like mixed feelings on this. And I'm wondering how mixed her feelings are going to be, because she talks a lot here about how as a kid, she didn't really understand the decisions that adults had to make, which I'm pretty sure we can all understand and have all experienced as well. But I'm wondering if there isn't some other shit going on that she still doesn't know about. Like that she thinks she has the whole story now because she's in her late teens, early 20s at this point. And probably she still doesn't, and maybe doesn't understand the extent to which her mother was afraid. Maybe not even because of her father. It might have been that she was afraid because of the people her father was friends with. I'm not sure. But in any case, Ray's mom got wards and all kinds of like spells and charms to keep him from finding her. And during that period was when she got really sick because she wasn't exposed to sunlight the way that she needs to be, evidently. So when her mother gives her an opportunity to reconnect with her grandma, her paternal grandmother, Ray is kind of resistant initially because she feels a little abandoned that her grandmother didn't try and find her, didn't seem to care that she was sick. And her mom then has to explain to her about the wards and everything that she did to keep from being found. And so Ray does reconnect with her grandmother after all, and finally is told about who her dad is. At least she's told a little bit. Her grandmother asks her to keep this a secret from her mom and is just basically like, listen, I understand where your mom's coming from and making the decisions that she's made to keep you away from your dad. And I'm not even saying those were bad decisions. I think she's right. But you can't just not tell your kid about something of this magnitude and think that their ignorance is going to keep them safe from it, because it's gonna out. Like, her attitude is eventually something is going to happen that's going to cause all of this to surface. And it's better for you to go into it with all of the information that you can have so that you're making an actual choice and not just stumbling through life with this, like, this sort of decision being made for you already by your parent. So her grandma tells her about the fact that her father was a magic handler, is the like kind of term that's used in a neutral sense, and shows her that she is a transmuter. So what that means is her grandmother gives her a flower and wraps her little granddaughter's hands around it and is like, what's something else small and light that you could hold in your hands? Her granddaughter says, a feather. And she says, okay, think really, really hard about that feather. And Ray does. And then when she opens her hands, there is a little feather sitting there where the flower was. And basically, there's like some really interesting rules to this that I find fascinating. This is something I'm a Ravenclaw. We like rules. That's just how it goes. And I find this to be really fascinating. This whole idea of magic, like the transmutation, which I think would be transfiguration in Harry Potter speak, being more or less difficult depending on not only the density of the object, although that does factor into it, but also how much the object that you're trying to transform has been handled by people. So her example is, if you're trying to transmute a tool that somebody uses every day, like a hammer or something, that's going to be harder to do than, say, a plaque that's sitting on the wall that people don't really touch and, interact with. So yeah, this concept is really interesting to me because it sort of ties in with the idea of dust in the Golden Compass series, where items that are like man-made that conscious thought went into creating have far more dust around them than items that were, for example, just a slab of slate that was used as an ancient tool isn't going to have the same kind of dust surrounding it as a hammer that is made in a factory with a, wooden handle and everything. So this idea of things that are handled by people, it's almost like our consciousness solidifies them into what they are, which also ties into something that I did earlier for Spoil Me, which was So You Want to Be a Wizard. They talk about how occasionally items in the world or beings or planets will forget what they are. And so they have to read from this book that describes them in order to reassert what things are supposed to be in order to keep them, in their proper place in the universe. So it's like our consciousness has been reasserting and reasserting and reasserting what something is by constantly using it and interacting with it. So that item has somehow absorbed that like intention and knowledge from us using it and remembers. And it's harder for us to trick it into thinking that it's something else, is how I'm sort of interpreting this, which I think is such a cool idea and really interesting. And it's just so, it's like I said, a very similar idea to other things that I've read, but it's still different in its own way. And that's something that I love all of these different versions of magic that I'm coming across by doing Spoil Me. It's just I wonder if it says something about the authors and the way that they approach the world, how different their rules for magic are from each other. Is there a psychological element there? I don't really know what that would look like, but, so anyway, the thing that kind of trips Ray up, because she keeps practicing this with her grandmother every time she goes to visit, and, keeps practicing on more and more intricate different things. And finally, her grandmother gives her a ring. And because it's a ring that her grandmother wears every day, it's got a lot of handling. And also, it's made out of metal and a precious stone. So very dense, very hard. So this is a super difficult challenge that her grandmother has presented her with. And Ray tries and tries to change it because her grandmother says, "I'm tired of this red stone. Give me a green stone." So Ray tries to do that and nothing happens. And so her grandmother is like onto something here. Like she's kind of figured it out. I'm going to read this. We were sitting on the porch again in the shade of the trees. "Let us try once more," she said, "but not here. Come." We stood up. I still had the ring in one hand and went down the steps to the ground and then down to the shore and into the sunlight. It was another hot, bright day, and the sky was as blue as a sapphire. I wasn't ready for what happened. When I closed my hands around the ring again and put all my frustration into this final attempt, there was a blast of something. I shuddered as it shot through me, and for the merest moment my hands felt so hot it was as if they would burst into flame. Then it was all over, and my hands fell apart because I was shaking so badly. My gran put her arm around me. I held up my unsteady hand, and we both looked. Her ring had a green stone, all right, and the setting, which had been thin, pale, plain gold, had erupted into a thick, wild mess of curlicues with several more tiny green stones nested in their centers. I thought it was hideous, and I could feel my eyes filling with tears. I was, after all, only 9 years old, because this time I had done so much worse than nothing. But she laughed in delight. So the sunlight, it turns out, is the thing. For Ray, it's like a battery. And here, this is another thing I really love about this universe that Robin McKinley has created here, is that I don't feel like this gets explored enough, because when we are in our, pop culture stuff about vampires, and I talked about this before, that there are different mythologies that allow vampires to walk in sunlight. I find them all to be kind of a cop-out, but to a degree, I understand why they're necessary for certain plots to develop the way they should or whatever. I don't like it, but I'll allow it. But it's always struck me how uneven it is. If you do have a mythology where vampires either aren't able to travel in sunlight or are able under, circumstances like Vampire Diaries where they have rings that allow them to. I have never heard of the humans being at a disadvantage at night the way that vampires are. The only disadvantage that humans are at night in most of these mythologies are the usual disadvantages that we're at night, which is that we can't see very well and we bump into things. It's like not, so vampires have, amazing vision and the night is their time. So they're naturally at an advantage, but there's no specific disadvantage for humans beyond what we would normally experience. And so what Robin has done has made it so that the vampires are really, really not allowed to be out in sunlight, except for something that comes up in a minute. And that for Ray, being in the sun is super important. Like, we hear earlier about how when she was a kid and she wasn't in the sun, she got sick. It's not just her magic. It's not just powering up her abilities. It's literally like she's a photosynthetic plant person, So I think that's really cool that we have a kind of polar opposite to the vampire thing. And she has, at the end of this dream, she's holding the pocket knife that she hid in her bra when she got captured. And she opens her hands and there's a key. And I was like, oh my God, what? So she wakes up, and it baffled me initially because she didn't do this right away, because I forgot about how she has to wait for the sun to be up. When she wakes up, it's nighttime. So she can't do this right away. And when she wakes up, she's in a bad way. Like, she's only slept for a few hours. She was laying on like a bag of bread for a pillow, and there's a vampire right there, and things are bad. And Beau's buddies, TM, show up again to like harass her vampire friend. I say friend because they're on the same side at this point. And they are kind of afraid of vampire friend, VF. And she isn't sure how she can like tell that, because she doesn't know enough about vampires and their attitudes towards things to really make that kind of call. But she can sense that there's something about this particular vampire that they are. It's not just that they don't like him. They're unnerved by him, and they are really trying to get him to eat her. And so what they do is slice open like her breastbone with a knife, just a bit so that she's bleeding, and throw her into vampire friend's lap. And then they bail, and they're laughing because they're pretty certain that this is just going to like be it. It happens so fast that she doesn't even react for a second. Like, she's just like, what the fuck just happened? Because they're vampires. So they're super fast. They have her cut and sliced and thrown down before she even knows what happened. And she manages to get away from VF really, really quick, but she can tell that this is really hard for him. And she like curls up away from him and waits for the sun and just like hopes and prays that he isn't going to cave. Spoiler alert, he does not cave. And he doesn't even lick up the blood that fell on his shirt, which I thought for sure he would do. Evidently, his moral code is even stricter than I thought, because I figured anything that falls wherever is just scraps, like he'll take it. But I guess it's just her blood overall is just off limits, which I respect. That's probably a good way to be. Like, if you're trying to not eat sugar and you are like, except for sugar that, is in like the pieces of cookie left in the box after everybody finishes the regular cookie, I guess that's sort of cheating, right? So, all right, good on you, VF. And she finally does the thing with the pocket knife and transforms it into the key and unlocks herself. And he's like really kind of impressed watching her because he didn't know that she was a magic handler. And then she's like, all right, show me your leg. I'm going to unlock you. And he's like, hey, buddy, I appreciate the thought, but that's stupid. And you should not do that for so many different reasons. And I found this so funny because, first of all, mad props to Ray for wanting to save this vampire. I would be feeling the exact way that she feels, which is, on the one hand, it's a vampire. They are dangerous and bad for me. On the other hand, how can I just like walk away from this prison and leave him there and know that he's being tortured? Like, how could I can't just do that. And I really would be in the exact same mindset as her right now, where they're obviously fucking with this dude. Like, she and what she has gone through is purely a side effect of what they're trying to do to VF. So if she leaves, not only is she just leaving this guy to be tormented, but they're going to find somebody else to take her spot. So she's like kind of sentencing another human to probably be bait again. Right. So this is how my brain, like, I'd totally overthink this and I'd just be like, I can't just do it. And he understandably is one, worried about being released and being like left with her because he wants to eat her. But also he is concerned that it's daytime and she's going to leave now. Or if she waits to leave at night, it's going to be like, there's no way they're getting past the guards. The guards that Bo employs, apparently he doesn't like do cross species type stuff. So there's no wearer people. There are no demons. It's all vampires. So during the day, there are no guards whatsoever. Seems like a real chink in your plan there, buddy. Maybe you should diversify a little bit. But yeah, she does this thing. The only problem that I have with this really is how out of left field this felt, because she says, as she's transforming this knife into a key, she says that this is the first transmuting that she has done in 15 years. Listen, that's a long ass time. It's the first thing she's done. She does it, but it's definitely like somewhat energy draining. And then, despite that being the first thing that she's done this whole time, she suddenly knows that she can do something to transmute this vampire so that he does not burn in the sun. Questions. I have them. I just don't understand how this even occurs to her. And I would really like a little bit more like lead up to her making this realization, or the like, realization is the wrong word. Like, it's an experiment, really. It's not even a realization where she's putting pieces together and realizes, oh, I bet I can do this. It's a purely like, ooh, I wonder if I can. I sure hope I can. And they burst into flame. They burst into flame when they come in contact with sunlight. So this isn't just like, oh, I'll do a patch test of this hair dye on the inside of my wrist to make sure I'm not allergic. This is, I'm going to blowtorch my wrist, like, and hope that it's just doesn't blowtorch me. Like, what? And he's willing to take this risk, apparently, without knowing even what she's going to do, because she doesn't actually explain it to him. She just takes his hand and steps into the sun, and he just does it. So I have a problem with this moment. It just doesn't feel organic to me. It feels like, and it's like, I understand the urgency in terms of her needing to escape and get out of here, but it doesn't feel genuine because the urgency earlier didn't seem like that huge an obstacle. Like, she knows that she's got hours and hours. The sun is already up or has just come up. And they have like a long drawn out conversation about the pros and cons of him even coming with her before she even tries this. So I just want to know how he was willing to risk this in the first place. But, you know, okay, whatever it is, she doesn't know how, he doesn't know how. She's able to do something as long as she is in contact with his skin. She can keep him from burning up. So this is really interesting. Like, I'm sure that we'll get maybe a little bit more of an explanation about this later, but she talks about how she's the only one in the bakery that can really stand the heat of the kitchen in the summertime, which if you have ever worked in food service and you have ever worked in an unair conditioned kitchen, you know, there is no describing what that's like to people. Like, there is simply no way to explain to someone what it's like working in those conditions for, you know, a 10-hour day. Because if you work in kitchens, you're not getting an 8-hour day. And if you work in like a food truck or something, you know, even better. Like food trucks, it's just like a tiny metal closet as you're being baked slowly. So the fact that she like stands up to heat really goes with her, you know, abilities regarding sunlight. So I'm curious if there's something about vampires and their being sensitive to sunlight that she's like specifically equalizing that part of them, or is there something about her that is giving him an ability that he didn't have before? Like she's passing on some of her tolerance for heat and light to him. Like, which way is that going? Or maybe it's both. I don't know. But yeah, she winds up like, he decides, okay, first of all, who the fuck are you that you're able to do this? Because this is not possible. What just happened? Like, he's sincerely thrown off. And that's the only time she's ever seen him thrown off. And also he staggers, which for vampires to like not be completely graceful at all times, it takes some serious shit to happen. So he asks her who she is and she tells him who her father was. And he's like, motherfucker. And there's this long pause where he's telling her, you know, now that you've told me who you are, it would be really smart for me to just eat you. Because, like, that would give me all of the powers that you have for a good long while. Like, not forever, but like a week. And I could fuck Bo up within that time. Sincerely. And she has to kind of stand there and be like, hoping that this vampire decides not to eat her. Spoiler, he does not eat her. And finally, thinking this whole thing through, he's like, all right, I'm going to come with you. If you can hold off this sunlight, we'll see how long that spell you're doing lasts. But if we do, I have to carry you. And then he tells her some shit, which I like that she calls him out on this a little bit. He tells her that if she had walked out of there, she's barefoot, her feet would be shredded by, you know, rocks and bricks and pieces of branch and whatever, and she would be leaving little bits of blood as she walked, which if you've ever walked barefoot even down your gravel driveway, you know how fucking awful it is. So I believe this 100%. He calls it blood spore, and he says, if you were to go and get out of here, I don't think you could have made it. And she's like, oh, really? So you were just going to let me leave? And he's like, well, what was I going to do? Of course you had to try. Like, I'm not going to tell you, but there's nothing you could have done. Like, there's no shoes that I'm keeping from you, you know? So he's going to carry her, and that will enable her to both stay in contact with him, conserve some of her energy, which we find out later is super necessary, and also keep her feet off the ground. So they go, and he's carrying her. And when they're in the direct sunlight, it's much more tiring for her than when they're under the trees, because they finally, you know, there's this big patch outside of the building where they were being kept that has all the trees cut down, so they're in full sun. But then they get into the border areas where it's the woods, and she's able to relax a little bit. And it's easier for him too, I suspect, but we don't really get his POV. And it didn't really occur to me when she got brought to this building, she was being brought by vampires. So, and they camped at one point, so it was 30 miles from where her cabin is. That's not an inconsequential distance. And if you're walking 30 miles, she was hoping to make that in 12 hours because of, sunset. Girl, I mean, I get it. You have to do what you have to do, and good luck to you. But holy shit, you're booking it, right? Like, and in bare feet, nah, she would not have made it. So he carries her all the way back to where her car had been parked next to her parents' cabin. Surprise, her car is gone. It's just gone. And I am giving her some slack on this because part of me wants to be like, how did it not occur to you that they wouldn't take your car? But on the other hand, why would it occur to you? Like, you are going through one of the craziest things you've ever lived through in your life, and you're exercising magic that you haven't used in 15 years, and you're palling up with a vampire. Yeah, I guess that would slip your mind. And he is unsurprised, VF, when he realizes he's like, yeah, I didn't think that Bo would leave that kind of loose end just dangling. And she's like, yeah, I guess you're right, but now I don't know what to do. And realizes, like, even if she had the car there, she still didn't really think through what she was going to do after that. She's just going to pop him in the car, have him like touching her as she drives them to where? Drop him off somewhere? Like, it's still light. She'd have to, the whole thing is a mess, frankly. And finally, VF says that he's going to drop her off at home. And she's like so grateful that he's willing to do that. Home, though, is a considerable distance. And she still has to keep up her magic to keep him safe from sunlight on the way. And they're going to be passing in view of regular human beings. So they need to disguise him as best they can. And she's like, dude, I don't know if you're aware of this, but you look crazy. So while you may be out in sunlight, which precludes anybody from thinking that you're a vampire, you sure as fuck don't look human. And they're going to think that you're a demon or you're something. And somebody's going to report you. So we need to make this crazy look that you've got going on seem like it makes sense somehow. And she decides the most like believable thing is to make the two of them look like they're junkies and just like fuck their clothes up and smear mud on them. And just apparently there's like a group of addicts that hang out in this certain area of town. And she feels like she can draw from them for inspiration on how to look. And that's what they do. They use that as a cover for VF to bring her home. And when she gets home, Yolanda, her landlady, is still awake, and she thinks about going to Yolanda and asking her to let her in with the spare key. Because obviously Ray doesn't have her keys anymore. But there would be so many questions, so much like with VF here, that's just not an option. So she does one last burst of magic with what had been the switchblade that then turned into a key for her manacle. She then turns that key into another key for her apartment and gets let inside. And our vampire buddy actually like looks after her, which is real sweet of him. And he did not need to do that, but he feeds her milk and old muffins that she's got and makes sure that she's okay and in bed before he goes. And this really surprised me. So she passes out because on the way home, using the magic that she's using to keep him from being burned, it starts to take its toll. So they're like going through the woods still at one point, and she's starting to see things like she calls it hallucinations. I'm not sure that that's what's happening. It could be hallucinations. It could also be that her magic is like starting to get into her brain and she's seeing things that are actually there that she just wouldn't be able to see otherwise. Because there's like creatures and shit in the woods. Seems like we've got vampires and werewolves. Why not? Let's add some fairies and gnomes and goblins and God knows what else to the mix. Sure, let's do that. And then when they get into town proper, she's like raving, like talking to herself and her eyes are rolling around. So initially when they came up with this disguise to be junkies, she thought she was going to be the one that looked the most normal and they'd have to explain what his deal was. And it turns out she's the crazy looking one that everybody's crossing the street to avoid, which I find delightful. Like, I like that reversal a lot. And so she gets put into bed and fed and everything and passes out. And when I said that this was the part that really surprised me, when she wakes up, she doesn't remember what happened to her, which I don't have like a problem with that, narratively speaking. That's fine, but I just wasn't expecting it. And I guess it's a nice thing to have like a combo of things going on. One, we have her just trying to go about her life, wondering why she's so sore, because she is just so fucked up. And her feet are still mangled up. Despite not walking that much, like still she had bare feet, so they're fucked up, cuts all over her, like from brush and bushes and everything, and the cut on her chest. And she's wearing this crazy silk dress that the vampires gave her. And she doesn't understand why she's wearing this dress, which is not something that she would ever pick out. Why she's so fucked up. Like, so she decides that she's going to take a bath. And there's like bits of what happened coming back to her, but she's kind of consciously pushing it away. Like, yeah, you know what? I'd rather not remember that. So let's just, almost like it's a bad dream that you're trying not to think about, you know? And fine, I'm going to read this little bit here. I'm trying to find the exact part here. Oh yeah, here it is. I had forgotten everything. I was forgetting everything right now. My feet and my face and the gash on my breast would stop anyone from pressing me too hard to remember something so obviously terrible. Yolanda must be out. Otherwise, she would have heard the bathwater running and have come upstairs to find out if I was all right. She would have known that I've been missing, that on a normal day I would have been at the coffee house hours ago, not up here running bathwater, that I've been missing, that I didn't have to remember or think about anything. I could just stand here and let the sun heal me. I was relieved that Yolanda wasn't here, asking questions, being appalled and sickened, reminding me by her distress. I was relieved that no one would disturb me till I had finished forgetting. The bath should be full by now. Now that the sunlight had begun to do its work, I wanted to be clean. I might have to use every bar of soap I had and bring the scouring pads in from the kitchen. I was going to burn this dress wherever it came from. It was nothing I'd have ever chosen. I couldn't imagine why I was wearing it. When I was completely clean again and wearing my own clothes, I would call the coffee house, tell them I was home again. Home and safe. Safe. As I turned away from the window, a square of white lying on the kitchen table caught my eye. It was my notepad, which usually lived beside the phone. On it was written, "Goodbye, my sunshine, Constantine." I'm sorry, what? Constantine? Is this that Constantine? Is that what we're doing? Is that what we're doing in this? Don't spoil me. Don't tell me. Don't tell me. But is it? I'm very curious. Rosalie says Bo's gang called him Connie. Yeah, that's true. Which is hilarious. How disrespectful. Constantine, you know, I don't even have feelings on this one way or another, because if it is that Constantine, I hardly know anything about that character. So, okay, sure, let's do that. If it's not, all right, kind of better, maybe. I don't know. I really don't have like a preferred option on this, on whether it's that Constantine or not. If it is, though, it will be hilarious to me. Just because, but damn, okay. Yeah, I'm really curious now. And that's the end, guys. That's where I stopped. So this whole, like the whole way that this went, I'm really enjoying. And I said last time that I appreciated how scared Robin made Ray, because I feel like there are things that I'm very hard to please. And I'm just going to say that right out of the gate. I'm very hard to please with character stuff. Either characters are like supposedly being brave when I think they're being really stupid and doing shit that I'm like, this doesn't even, why would you, what? Or they're passive in moments that I'm like, how can you not be pushing this issue more? Like, how are you just letting this happen? I don't feel like that in either direction with Ray. I feel like Ray is doing the exact amount of thinking and reacting that one would be doing in her situation. So I really I'm going to bring up fucking Discovery of Witches again. Forgive me. But because it's the other book that I'm reading at the moment that has vampires in it and people who do magic and whatever, it's what I'm thinking of. And I keep drawing comparisons between the two of them. So Discovery of Witches, this woman, the main character, is a witch who hasn't used her magic for whatever reason, bullshit reasons, fine. And she keeps being pushed to figure out what her magic is by the guy that she's into. And so he's like leading her by the hand through what she can do. And he's the one that notices before she does how her mind worked when something happened and figures out how to retrace her steps. And basically he's a vampire teaching a witch how to witch, which I'm not a fan of. Like, who are you? Get out of here, dude. And she's so passive, but she's like got all these magic powers, and yet she's really passive. So this author was trying to make her into this really powerful character, and I'm 3/4 of the way through the book here, and all she's done is listen to everybody who tells her what to do and never takes initiative herself. It's always because Matthew said such and such. Matthew suggested. Matthew looked at me and he could see. Like, girl, you're inside your head. Do you not know how your own mind worked when you did that thing before? Like, how are you not putting these things together? And so, like, giving somebody magic powers does not make them a powerful character. Those things are not the same thing. So what I like a lot about Ray is that, yeah, she has this dream that sort of like takes her by the hand a little bit and is like, hey, remember what you can do. But I like to think that dream wasn't just like, some sort of outside force pointing her in a certain direction. I like to think that dream was her own brain being like, girl, you know how to handle this. Come on, get it together. And she doesn't have to ask this fucking vampire how to do anything. She doesn't have to pose the question to him whether or not she could do something to keep him from being burned by sunlight. It's all her idea. It's all in her head. And she knows how to do it from when she was a kid. And she just has to try again with the key thing. The sunlight thing, that's another matter. And I'm not thrilled about how that happened, but whatever. I just really like that Ray is figuring shit out for herself that she kind of already knows and is just like tapping into it again now that she has to. And B, I like the fact that she's like buddies with this vampire real quick, but they are not romantically anything. He is not appealing. He is not attractive. He is not like charming, really. He's very polite and he's very diffident in a way, but he is not somebody that you want to go like have a beer with. Maybe you would. I kind of would. Okay, fine. But I just really, the fucking romantic doomed love vampire thing, it can be done well, and that's fine. But I am tired of it, and it's so predictable. So having him be kind of this like vaguely repulsive genuine still monster, but that they teamed up for a little bit. I'm here for it. I like the way that went. And I like the way that, like, she saved him and he saved her. And but his saving of her, i.e. carrying her the whole way, could not have been possible without her ability, which I really do like. So yeah, Rosie's saying, don't fall for him just because he doesn't kill you. That's the lowest bar there is. Yeah. Listen, Discovery of Witches, this guy that supposedly loves her so much, who's so great, literally says to her at one point, I will kill you myself before I let anyone else hurt you. That's not a romantic thing to say to a person. And yet it's treated like this, like, I don't understand what kind of mindset you have to have. Like, basically, the character of Matthew in Discovery of Witches is Edward from Twilight, but like even more dickish, I think. He's awful. I hate him. And he's supposed to be the guy that she's like in love with. And all she does is wander around and be like, for some reason, he's in love with her and finds her amazing, even though she has no discernible personality that I can tell. And, just the usual thing. So let's just say Sunshine was a breath of fresh air. And I'm still hate reading Discovery of Witches. I still am. So, because, you get to a point with a book that you finally realize, oh, you know what? I hate this. But you've invested so much time that now you feel like, well, I can't just not finish now. I can't, I have to see it through. I deserve to find out what happens, and what's killing me is that nothing happens. Oh my God. This book, Sunshine, we find out who she is. We get a little bit of her family and her friends. She gets kidnapped by vampires. She gets put in a thing. This is 2 episodes I've done. She gets palled up with that vampire. She does some magic. She escapes from that shit. That vampire brings her home. She forgets everything. So much has happened in such a short time. Holy shit. Why don't other writers know that it's boring to just have them stare into each other's eyes forever? Especially when they don't even they're not either of them likable people. Anyway, I'm sorry. This is not about Discovery of Witches. I'm just, like I said, I keep drawing comparisons because I'm reading them at the same time. So yeah, I'm really enjoying this book. I really like this world. So far, I really like Ray. I relate to Ray, except for that she likes to get up in the morning, which is the worst thing I've ever heard. And no, definitely not. And I'm really interested to see what happens next. So I had told you all about how there are apparently real page markers in the Kindle. It's not really real. I was being too optimistic when I said that. The part that I ended on is technically page 107, which I think the print book, Rosie said was page 86. So it's pretty far off. I don't think Rosie has booked the next Spoil Me episode yet. And when she does, I'm going to let you guys know. I'm going to translate the page numbers for you guys. Rosie says with her next paycheck, thank you, Rosie. I really want to read the next part. So, but yeah, I am going to try and give you guys a little bit better of an idea if you are following along where to stop. Just for reference, this episode, where I stopped reading, the last bit was his note, "Goodbye, my sunshine, Constantine." And that's the part where I stopped. And for the last episode, it stopped with, "If he wasn't lying," I think was the last line. So yeah, it's a little tricky to figure out exactly where to stop. So Rosie, when you book the next one, do me a favor and just write the last sentence of whatever section so that I know ahead of time. And that way I won't have to speed read right before I start. But luckily there wasn't that much left to read. Her recovery with the bathing and pushing memories away and telling herself that she'll be fine really put me in the mindset of a sexual assault aftermath. Oh, you know what? You're right. I didn't think of that, but there's a scene in Stranger Things, Do you guys know what I'm talking about? And it's not actually a sexual assault thing then either, but it's sort of a similar like trauma where a character gets in the shower and is like clearly trying to wash off what just happened to her and can't. And I'm really lucky. Like, I have been sexually harassed, but I have never been assaulted, and I've never had like that feeling of needing to like get this off me. And I've heard from close friends who have been assaulted that they have done like this exact thing. So yeah, good call, Rosie. I didn't really think about that, but trying to forget, and just because the human brain is an amazing thing. When we talk, it's easy to read like, oh, she was trying to forget, and think of it as like as a metaphor. It's not. We can make ourselves forget things we don't want to know. We 100% can. It's not hard to do either. It's kind of scary how easy it is to make ourselves believe the things that we want to believe and ignore the things that we don't want to pay attention to. It's something that, like, on a small scale, I do for Unspoiled. I will be the unspoiled one for something, and I'll stumble across a spoiler, and I will make a conscious effort to forget the spoiler. And I have succeeded many times in making myself forget shit. So like, there'll be like a little inkling, like, something about this, but I won't make the actual synaptic connection. And when I get to that spoiler, I might have I feel like I heard something about this, but I won't actually remember the spoiler itself. So if I can do that with like little things, imagine what you can do with a huge trauma. You've got to be able to, yeah, there is a reason that we do it too, because it helps us make it through and continue to live our lives. So it's a mental health, like, it's a feature, not a bug. But once you decide that you want to deal with something, it can be a bug. Survival, exactly. So yeah, Abby said survival, and Rosie said your brain's trying to protect you. Exactly. So yeah, that's a good kind of association, because it was a violation. They ripped her out of her world, forced her to wear this dress to be like appealing, and then threw her in the guy's lap after cutting her open, hoping for her to get eaten. Like, it's as close to trying to initiate a rape as anything, right? I mean, it's a really weird, and this is what I like about what this book is. Her vampires are fucking scary dudes who do bad shit, period. There's not like, we have this one that seems to be doing his own thing, and okay, fine. But mostly they're monsters, the end. And I kind of like that. I don't feel like we get that quite enough anymore. So yeah. All right. Well, is there anything you guys want to ask me before I wrap this up? Because I feel like I've talked about everything I wanted to mention. I don't remember if Ray actually says that her grandmother died. I think she did, but I'm hoping that her grandmother's like still alive somewhere and comes back into the picture, because she sounds rad. And apparently she's able to do some really intense magic, because she turns a piece of fabric, like she turns the feather into fabric that's like polka dotted, which I guess is really, really advanced magic. Which Ray thinks about and is like, I don't think I appreciated as a kid how hard that is, but she really was doing some shit. So I wonder what she'd think of Ray being able to make a vampire not burst into flames, because I feel like that's pretty fucking impressive, and especially that she sustained that shit for 12 hours. So yeah, I just kind of want her grandmother to be more of a thing. And I want to get to know her mom too, because her mom, we haven't actually really met her, but from what we've heard of her, she has this angry energy. And I'm here for that. I feel like that women characters aren't allowed to be angry enough without just being shrewish and terrible. And her mom seems angry in this very like valid, justified sort of way, this like avenging wrath sort of thing. So I want to hear more about her mom too. And also Yolanda as her landlady, like good female characters in this book all around. So I'm here for all of it. All right. Well, nobody's spoken up, so I'm going to say that y'all don't have questions. I managed to get GarageBand working about like 5 minutes into the recording, so that's cool. And thank you all so much for coming, and thank you so much to Rosie for booking this. It's been so much fun, and I really like it, and thank you for having good taste. And, you know, I'm just waiting because I feel like it's inevitable. I'm going to have a Spoil Me that asks me to cover something that I really don't like, and I'm dreading that. But so far, I've been having amazing luck. Everything that everybody's asked me to cover, I've been like, oh, this is really good. So let's keep this show going, shall we? All right, everybody. Thank you all again for coming. And I will keep you informed on Facebook and on Unspoiled. This is facebook.com/unspoiledpod/events if you want to check the events there. Or you can go to unspoiledpodcast/events or unspoiledpodcast.com/events. And the calendar is on there too. So if you guys are trying to follow along, you can check there, and I will be posting the Crowdcast links there. And you can join us for the next one, hopefully. So, all right, everybody. Thank you all. Thank you, Rosie. And I will see you soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.